two great musicians from Ann Arbor, Laszlo Slomovits and Jennifer Burd. And Laz was here a number of times in the past. He's really great at taking poetry and putting it to music. And I haven't heard Jennifer yet, but if he's hanging out with her, I bet she's pretty good too. So I'm going to just turn it over to them for one song, and then we'll go on with the stories.
All right. So we also want to welcome you and thank you for being here. And this is a poem by a contemporary poet, Dan Gerber, that I set to music. And there's a part near the end that I'll invite you to sing, and it'll be easier than what you invited me to sing. I promise. Oh, and I gotta tell you, there's a myth in the poem, a Chinese myth, an ancient Chinese myth, in which a bird is born with only one wing. And so it takes two of them to fly. And it becomes an image for how we can help each other fly. Here we go. Often I imagine the earth through the eyes of the atoms we're made of. Atoms, peculiar atoms, everywhere. No me, no you, no opinions, no beginning, no middle, no end. Soaring together like those ancient Chinese birds. Hatched miraculously with only one wing, helping each other fly home, fly home. Helping each other fly home. Oh, helping each other fly home. Helping each other fly home. Fly home. That's your part. Sing it with us. Helping each other fly home. Oh, helping each other fly home. Helping each other fly home. Fly home. One more time. Helping each other fly home. Sing it out now. Oh, helping each other fly home. Helping each other fly home. Fly home. Thank you very much.
good friend Todd told me about a book and read a few parts of it, and I instantly bought it. And after I read it, I started sending it to other people.
Would it happen to be this book?
It would happen to be this book. I'll get the name in a second. It's a collection of all original one-line aphorisms, or laphorisms as he calls them. The book is entitled Letting Go is All We Have to Hold On To. Mind-altering jokes. And it was number 2 in the humor category on Amazon. And according to Greg, who wrote the book, in the bathroom reader category, it was only a number 1. He's got a little note here, that is a joke. I think you understood that. The material is both funny and challenging in a way. His one-liners challenge a lot of conventional thinking and challenge a lot of the way we commonly use language. He's asking us to challenge ourselves, I think, to take our search for truth a little further. I also appreciate the overall geometry of his humor. He's like a balloon maker at the circus, taking ideas and twisting them into new shapes. Some of them are like Mobius strips that turn in on themselves as they circle around. These laphorisms, which he calls the Eisenberg principles, are like modern Zen koans, pushing us a little closer to, well, I guess we'll find out soon. I do. Greg Eisenberg.
Thank you very much. Thank you for that kind introduction. Great to see you all tonight. Michelangelo said, "You keep removing marble until there's nothing left to take away." I think that's a very useful metaphor for life and for certain types of writing. Doing the type of writing that I do, maybe I'm as much of a sculptor as I am a wordsmith, chipping off little pieces of false narrative with each joke. And there are about 700 in my book. I write jokes to keep chipping away at the truth of who I am. I write humor to process whatever I'm going through, which is usually a lot. It's like removing a chip of something that needed to go away with each joke. No, we might not all look like David the statue when we're done, but hey, we can't all be king of the Jews. There's a lot I want to say about the material, but I also want to let it speak for itself. So I'm going to share a few random moments from a few random chapters. Chapter 1. Take my advice and think for yourself. I can verify with 100% certainty. I don't have a clue what I'm talking about. We were practicing Zen when the identity theft happened. Which is why they didn't really get much. Aristotle said, "We are what we repeatedly do," a thought I often ponder on my way to the bathroom. I always follow my instincts, except when I get a funny feeling, maybe I shouldn't. I do believe in a completely parallel universe. I just don't think we're going to run into it anytime soon. Focus on other problems. I like to learn from all people, but especially those who agree with me. Unlike you, I'm not drawing distinctions between people. I can tell where you're at with by watching your reaction. Really, you are the show more than me. It's like how you respond is telling me kind of where you're coming from, how you relate to this material. The people who say you create your reality with your thoughts sure are hard to get away from at parties. I am totally irreverent, but only out of a deep respect for everything that's sacred. The old Zen masters used to write koans for their students. which were funny, nonsensical statements that kind of boggled their minds. They are trying to shake up the rigidity of their students' thoughts with absurd statements that the normal mind can't even really process. Like the most famous one, what is the sound of one hand clapping? Sorry, that was two hands, but that was super funny for those guys. I don't know, times were different back then. I think things have changed. I feel like we've evolved and we need a new collection of brain-bending, thought-expanding, mind-altering jokes. So I'll read a few chapter selections now from chapter 2. I'm going aggressively new age. I love that you're such a free spirit, and I want you to be mine forever. Less really is more, so the more less you can get, the better. Focusing on quality over quantity does eventually work if you do it enough times. Now that I have it all, I miss the feeling that there must be something more. I had a group of friends. I want to just say that I write poetry, and I've written poetry in my life, songs, jokes, and humor more than anything, you need to vet it with other people. You need to see how other people respond to it, especially with this kind of writing. Is it funny because I thought it was funny? Is there some nuance or some word that I'm really attached to? Will other people really get it? So I actually had about a dozen people rate 400 of my jokes on a 1 to 10 scale. And I'm telling you that probably to build up the wrong expectation, but this next joke was their favorite out of all of them. Let's go. And I can tell you what the worst one was too, and I can tell you what the ones that they were most divided on. So I'm making a detailed list of all the things in life I'd really rather not remember. The pursuit of fame is said to be pure vanity by some of the most prestigious members of our society. I hate the stupid, petty power struggles in which I don't have the upper hand. We're all packaged in so many layers of story about who and what we are, and every morning we wake up and we have to unwrap ourselves. It's like Christmas every morning. And we ourselves are the package. We might not be the total package, but we are the gift to be unwrapped. I take a Buddhist-Jewish approach to wisdom. From the Buddhist tradition, I take it that life is suffering, and the only way to get out of suffering is to follow the Buddha's Eightfold Path. From the Jewish tradition, I also take that life is suffering, and there's nothing you can do about it. Chapter 3, think of me when you're meditating. I feel so sorry for you that everyone thinks of you as a victim. Life may be terribly hard and very lonely, but at least we're living longer these days. Most problems are completely imaginary, and for some people, this is a very real issue. I want to make my big difference in the world by showing people things never really change. Dualism does work for me, but only about half the time. This whole human experience is merely a long, lucid dream. And in it, you still owe me $200. Niels Bohr, the quantum physicist, said, "How wonderful that we have met with paradox. Now we have some hope of making progress. I think we have to face the paradoxes in life. We can't just smooth them over." Freud similarly said, neurosis is the inability to cope with ambiguity. Things don't tie together into a neat bow, though we try to make them. But the main physicist I want to focus on tonight is the famous Richard Feynman, who captured what I think is one of the main points of my book. He said, the first principle is that you must not fool yourself, because you yourself are the easiest person for you to fool. Chapter 5, even the earth is bipolar. By refusing to compete with you, I've already won. I question everything people say, but only because that's what the last guy told me to do. People are hungry for very simplistic explanations, and that's all you really need to know. I'm just blindly going along with the plan for us to not act like a bunch of sheep. That's what they said. Isn't that what they said? Reptile brain says kill. Mammal brain says see if empathy will work first. Neocortex says tape record the conversation and establish a paper trail. If it's true that I'm trying to uncover more and more of who I am in my writing, uncover more and more of my true self, I realized this afternoon, preparing for this talk, I'm kind of like a stripper. I'm up here to take it off for you. But you don't have to close your eyes or freak out. My clothes are staying on. No protest. Oh. Don't look so relieved. Trying to have fun. What's coming off are the false narratives we tell ourselves. What's coming off are the distortions of reality we all use to comfort ourselves into thinking we know what's going on. Keep that in mind as I read from selections from chapter 8. Immediate gratification is worth waiting for. I would offer to be there with you in spirit, but I have a prior commitment. What's that? Oh, didn't hear something. I started to party on Wednesday this week just to take a little pressure off the weekend. Living in a radically paradoxical universe has been nothing but a complete blessing. God only knows if I'll use my free will this time. Nihilists claim we can't know anything. I don't even think we know that. Does having too many options make you feel happy, sad, burdened, angry, or irritable? Which is it? Which is it? I feel deep gratitude for all the ways positive thinking helped me win my lawsuit against my kids. Once I made peace with the irony in life, everything else became harder to bear. The Ouroboros. The Ouroboros is a snake eating its own tail. Right? It has ancient Celtic and Greek roots. It symbolizes a statement, a conjecture, a line of reasoning which contains the seeds of its own destruction. It eats itself. It needs no help from anyone else in self-destructing. The Ouroboros symbolizes a statement, a thought that cannibalizes itself. It's not unlike the Chinese Taoist yin-yang symbol, which shows two fish swimming endlessly, eternally around each other, each containing their polar opposites right in their core, and it's the tension between them that holds the universe together. The art of Max Escher also plays with impossible objects. He draws things that look coherent, seem coherent, but upon closer scrutiny, don't follow the rules of Aristotelian logic. And I want you to keep that in mind while I read some selections from chapter 9. Feeling insufficient just isn't good enough. people who believe in mind over matter are running straight at us with large sticks in their hand. The impossibility of uncovering the truth has finally been exposed to the light of day. The mind thinks exponentially, the brain fires logarithmically, and my retirement fund was grown hydroponically. I'm borrowing from the future to pay for the past, but I'm staying very present in the process. Totally resent your self-indulgent lifestyle, and I hope it rubs off on me as soon as possible. I would give you my undivided attention, but I feel it would be rude to the person I'm texting with. Oh, and there's the Ouroboros right there, as we all have heard. My shadow self tends to grow longer in the late afternoon, usually around sunset. Is it just my imagination, or am I making things up? I am not my thoughts, I am not this body, and frankly, I'm not very employable. My book is a combination of elements. Some jokes are what I call laugherisms. Some are what I call epiphanies. Some are just little syllogisms. What I like to do is try to write statements that, well, they seem to be going well at first, but before you're even done getting them out of your mouth, the second half completely undermines the very point that the first half was setting off to make. I've trained my mind to do that. Good or bad, that's what I do. It's kind of deconstructive in nature. It's kind of like the Socratic method, showing and kind of proving how little I know. And I'm okay with that. I'm going to read some selections for you from chapter 11. Chop wood, carry water, charge phone. This is a real opportunity to do things the same way we've always done them before. The world would be more tolerant of differences if everyone were a little more like me. There's a lot of work you need to do on yourself before you can finally realize you're fine the way you are. Those most eager to be seen as well-adjusted can usually be counted on to do the most insane things. I saw the universe in a grain of sand 10 minutes before the police picked me up. I'm giddy with incredible joy that you're back on your bipolar medication. Lao Tzu believed the truth that can be spoken of is not the eternal truth, which explains why he was so quiet at parties. Out beyond ideas of right doing and wrongdoing, wrote Rumi, there is a field. I will rob you there. Look for the truth within, friends. It's a lot cheaper than airfare to Asia. Radio interviewer once asked the lead guitar player of the Grateful Dead, Jerry Garcia, what gets in the way of his creativity the most? He said, why, everything I think. I have to say, that kind of humility is rare, and humor is a kind of humility. In physics, there's something called the Heisenberg uncertainty principle. Uncertainty, or really more precisely, unknowability, is built into the very fabric of atomic particles. The principle is not saying there is a way to know it, we just haven't figured it out yet. The principle is saying there's definitely no way to know. Now, my name is Eisenberg, and because I'm also intrigued by the paradoxical nature and unknowability of things, like I'm sure all of us are, I think my one-sentence long modern Zen koans is almost like a set of mathematical proofs concerning the limits of knowledge. And I call them the Eisenberg principles. How's that for humility? I'll do better at remaining detached about outcomes when things start going a little better. Relatable? Our finally learning how to live without anticipating the future has only just begun. When I first set off down the road of modesty, I had no idea I would take it so far. Come on. When I first set off down the road of modesty, I had no idea I would take it so far. Sometimes it's the delivery, I'm sorry. I was truly saddened to share the news of your misfortune with all of my friends. It's kind of the more mean-spirited ones that I'm getting the bigger ones. I learned how to sit perfectly still in India, China, and Japan. The word comedic, I just realized this week, comedic, the word comedic has the word medic in it. Humor is medicine. It can be a special kind of medicine for the mind. You take pills for the brain, or at least I assume you do. I don't, but you take pills for the brain, you can take jokes for your mind. So instead of thinking of this as some type of comedy show, think of it as a much-needed medical intervention. You're going to be okay. You got here just in time. I'll read a few more from the book. Let's see, where shall I go? Chapter 12, no, let's go towards the end. Chapter 13, ambivalence is the only way forward. If you're not completely baffled by how we got here, you don't understand a lick of world history. I only care about three things: money, power, and the salvation of all living beings. We're right on the verge of realizing that things are about to stay the same. I'm going to just mean-spirited ones to get some good laughs at the end. The pretenses you've absorbed to thrive in your part of society bother me a lot more than mine. I found sobriety so addictive, I abstained from it for a month. Which reminds me of this. When it comes to drinking and smoking, I'm taking a little break from doing without. The universe expanded 115 trillion miles in the time it took me to decide which shoes to wear today. Relatable? I knew it was my fault that the inevitable happened. So listen, everybody, thank you for having me. I'm from Boulder, Colorado. I really thank Evie and Alan for inviting me out and letting me share some of my Buddhist stand-up philosophy with you. Look forward to seeing a bunch of you tomorrow. Thank you again.
Final performer tonight, I got to know by meeting his wife and his daughter at Wellspring of Imagination a few years ago. And Paula was an astute businesswoman. She gave me a collected works of Bill, and I listened to those for the next few weeks. And knew that we had to have him here. What, the 6-time lying champion of West Virginia? 5? Of course, when he tells you something, he's lying, probably. I'd like to introduce now Bil Aleppo, great storyteller and #1 fan of Francis Poulenc.
Thank you. Is our Poetry Out Loud person still here?
She had to go.
Okay, let me just tell you that I have been the MC for the West Virginia State Championship of the Poetry Out Loud for about the last 5.5 years, and that is no joke. Those people are very impressive, so I wanted to say that to her, but she's not here, so I said it to you instead. My worst Christmas ever actually started the year before. The world can be a very confusing place when you're a toddler, right? Like 2, 3 years old, because you only have a limited vocabulary. So everything that you hear, you have to filter through the vocabulary that you know. Like when my daughter was probably 3 years old, my youngest daughter, she had just nailed her first shaky piton into the wall of understanding time. And so she finally figured out that not everything happens today. It's like that Eagles song, remember everything all the time? People think that's about cocaine. I think that's about being 3. She finally figured out that not everything happens today. But the only other day that she could both understand and articulate was yesterday. So she would ask me questions like, Daddy, are we going to Grandma's house today or yesterday? And I would say, yesterday. Because I think I'm funny. And she thinks she's a Time Lord. So the world's a confusing place. And so just after Christmas, when I was 4 years old, I noticed for the first time in my life that my dad had a bald spot on the back of his head. I said, Dad, how'd that happen? He said, well, on Christmas Eve, I heard a noise on the roof, and I stepped outside to see what was happening, and just as I stepped out from underneath the carport, I felt something lick the back of my head. And when I turned around and looked, there was Rudolph, and he had licked the hair right off the back of my head. And Dad said, if I ever see Rudolph again, I am going to shoo him away. Well, that was not an expression with which I was familiar. And when I filtered that through the limited vocabulary that I had, what I came out with was, if I ever see Rudolph again, I'm going to shoot him anyway. And I thought, oh no, Dad is going to kill Rudolph. That could put a damper on next Christmas. And I worried about that for about 6 days, because I was 4. And I didn't think about it again until the holiday season rolled around the next year. And when you're an adult and you're jaded and you've really lost all hope, when you hear the phrase the holiday season, you think to yourself, oh my goodness, that incredibly stressful period of time between Thanksgiving and New Year's. But when you're a child and there's still joy in the world, when you hear the holiday season, you think, because children know that the first and probably second most important holiday in the holiday season is actually Halloween, because that's the other day we get free stuff. And so, as Halloween started to roll around, I remembered that my father had this vendetta against Rudolph, and I wanted to know if he still intended to kill Rudolph. But if he didn't, if he'd forgotten, I didn't want to remind him. So I started to ask him a series of surreptitious questions, like, Dad, do you even own a gun? And he said, no, but I could get one. And I said, do you hunt? And he said, no, but sometimes when I'm at the barber, I read Field and Stream. And then I asked this question that there was no way he could see through this question. I said, Dad, is it even legal to shoot a deer on your roof? And I don't know what the urban deer population is like where you come from. But at home in Half-Dollar, West Virginia, yes, if that deer is on your roof, that's your deer. And so I was terribly worried that Dad was going to kill Rudolph. And then, as Halloween rolled around, this was also an election year, and I heard my neighbor say, if Jimmy Carter gets elected president, the entire country is going to hell. And by this time, I was 5, and I had a very narrow and theological understanding of what hell was. And I thought if Jimmy Carter got elected president, the people in Canada and the people in Mexico were just going to pull out the pins, and the entire continental United States was just going to drop into the sulfuric pits of hell. And then Jimmy Carter did get elected, and I thought we might not even make it to Christmas now, you know? So Dad was going to kill Rudolph. Jimmy Carter was taking us down. The only thing I had going for me was our kindergarten teacher had decided to teach us about world religions. And you might be thinking that's a pretty heady academic curricula for a bunch of 5-year-olds, but I can assure you that there was going to be glue, glitter, and macaroni involved. Now, I come from Half Dollar, West Virginia. It's a tiny little town. We had 2 streets in Half Dollar. One was called Main Street. The other one was called, no, that ain't Main Street. And we had the Methodist Church, and then we had your standard variety of Baptist churches. And our parents told us that over the hill there were some Catholics. But we didn't know if that was true, or if that was just something they told us so we'd go to bed at night. And so, I'm not making excuses for it, I'm not apologizing for it, but we were a very white, very Protestant community. We didn't know there were other religions. No one had ever taught us that before. And this teacher, bless her heart, she was from our little town there in West Virginia, but she had gone off to, I don't know, Columbia or Harvard, and this, you know, she had gone off full of liberal, and she had come home, and this was right at the end of the hippie era. I'm looking at you. And she wasn't just a carrier. She had it. And so she didn't expand her mind. And we were going to learn about Buddhism and Taoism and Confucianism and Islam and Judaism. And the first thing she told us was that not all children celebrated Christmas. And this blew our minds. No one had ever told us that before, and we were shocked. But not in a theological way. Our first thought was, oh my goodness, those kids aren't going to get free stuff on Christmas Day, right? Because we were Americans before we were Christians. And then we were going to make a menorah, and when it came time when we were studying Ramadan to understand what it was like to fast from sunrise to sunset for 40 days, to understand what that felt like to fast during daylight hours for that long, one day, we skipped snack. And then we knew her heart was in the right place. And then we were going to make a felt Santa Claus, and it was a Christmas tree ornament. And I wanted so badly to do a good job on that felt Santa Claus for several reasons. One, it was a Christmas tree ornament, and I knew if I did a good job on it, I could take that home to my mother, and I could give that to her for Christmas, and she would hang it on the Christmas tree where the best ornaments go, which is, of course, the back of the Christmas tree. And also, if I did a really good job on it, Santa would sense that, and Santa would know that this was like a positive talisman, a positive voodoo doll, world religions, and Santa would know that even if my father killed Rudolph, that I had done this for him, and maybe he would visit the sins of the father on the son. And during this period of time, I was at home. I'm too loud? I'm not loud enough? Okay. And so during this period of time, I was at home and my friends were over and we were playing hide and seek in the basement, and my older brother was laying on the couch under a blanket. He had the measles. And I thought to myself, I know where I'm going to hide. I'm going to hide under the blanket of the measles victim. I thought, what idiot would look? Never dawned on me what moron would hide. And so nobody found me. In fact, I didn't see anybody but my mother and the doctor for about 2 weeks. And when I finally went back to school, they had already made the Santa Clauses. You don't get too emotionally involved. Most of this is made up. And so I said to my teacher, can I make the Santa Claus? And she said, no, we've moved past that, but you can make the menorah. And I thought, I had the measles, not my bar mitzvah. And so I went home and I told my mother I didn't get to make the Santa Claus. Now you have to understand, I'm the last of 5 children. And if you're the last of a long line of children, you know that your parents really just don't care that much anymore. My mother was like, Paul, Kevin, Katie, Tammy, Deacon. Deacon was the dog. Before she remembered my name. And it's not that she didn't care anymore, it's just that her sympathy tank was empty. There just wasn't anything left. And so if I didn't lose a limb, I had to lose a limb and it not be my own fault to get any sympathy at all. So you can see I never got any. And I would go home, I said, Mom, I didn't get to make the Santa Claus. And she said, whatever doesn't kill you, put hair on your chest. So Dad was going to kill Rudolph. Jimmy Carter was taking us down. I didn't get to make the Santa Claus. And then the only thing I had going for me is Mom said that a lady in the church had given her tickets so that we could go and see a show at the Charleston Symphony Hall. And I was so excited. You're probably thinking, why are you excited? Why is a 5-year-old boy excited to go to the symphony? It was what we were going to see. My mother said that we were going to see Elephant Gerald. Now, when I was a child, still to this day, I loved elephants. But when I was a child, I had elephant bed sheets, I had elephant knickknacks, I had an elephant calendar. Babar was my favorite book. I didn't know who Elephant Gerald was, but I did know this. How many elephants can you name? There's Babar, Jumbo, Dumbo, and Horton. So that's only 4 elephants in the whole world with a name. So if you were an elephant with a name, you had to be an important elephant. I thought, who's this elephant? And then Mom said that Elephant Gerald was a musician and had played with Count Basie and Duke Ellington and Louis Armstrong. And I didn't know who they were either, but I knew that you had to be important to play with a Duke and a Count and the first man on the moon. And then I thought, how do elephants even play music? Do they stick their trunk out like this and they play it like a trumpet? Or they hold it like this and it's a saxophone? Or they hold it to the side and another elephant plays it like a flute? Or, and this was my most intoxicating idea, the elephant comes out on stage in a kilt. And it takes its trunk and it puts it in its own mouth. And it inflates itself. And then it squeezes and music comes out. It's beautiful. Really, you're gonna have to think that one through a little longer, but that's okay. So it came the night of the show. And my mom told me to go downstairs to my bedroom and get dressed, and she had laid out an outfit for me, but I didn't want to wear what she had laid out because I had a 3-piece suit. I was the only kid in the neighborhood who had a 3-piece suit. And not only did I have a 3-piece suit, but I had assembled it myself because I knew that to have a 3-piece suit, you needed to have a pair of pants, a jacket, and a vest that were all made out of the same material. Well, I had grown up wearing blue jeans, and I had a denim jacket, and I had recently acquired a denim vest. And so I had a 3-piece suit. And I put my 3-piece suit on, and I went upstairs, and my mother said, no! So I went back downstairs, and I put on what she had given me, and we got in the car, and we drove to Charleston. You have to understand that the Charleston, West Virginia Symphony Hall, this is why it was built. Back in the 20s and 30s, when the Canal Valley was remote enough that all the chemical companies could go and build horrible chemical plants there and pollute everything so they could send these people to this remote area. Those smart scientist people also wanted culture, and their spouses did. And so the city and the chemical companies got together and they built the Symphony Hall, and you had a better chance of getting a job as one of the chemists at the plant if you also played an instrument. And I could just see that, like this probably wouldn't pass HR now, but I just have this vision of these 2 guys, and one has graduated from MIT with 3 PhDs, and he has his Nobel Prize, and the other guy has graduated from Earl's Correspondence Chemistry School. And he's in cutoffs and an AC/DC t-shirt, and he's smoking a cigarette and dipping. And the hiring person is like, I understand you have 3 Nobel Prizes, but Charlie here plays the double, reeded oboe is what I'm going for. And so they hired him. It's a funny joke, I promise. So anyway, we got in the car, we drove to the Charleston Symphony Hall, and I'd never been to the Symphony Hall. It's a magnificent place, and there were men in actual tuxedos and women in evening gowns. And we went in, and we sat down, and the lights went down, and the curtains opened, and what I assumed was the opening act came out on stage. It was a Rubenesque, middle-aged African-American woman, and she sang a song about a knife named Mac. And when it was over, I turned to my mother and I said, "Where's the elephant?" And she said, "Shh." And then the lady sang another song, I don't know, Tisket a Tasket. And I said, "Where's the elephant?" And this went on, and I got louder and more insistent. And this was in the days when we used to be embarrassed by people's children's behavior in public instead of people's behavior in public. And then she sang Sleigh Bells. And there was a standing ovation, and she left the stage, and people threw flowers, and the curtain shut, and people were leaving the theater. And we were in the car on the way home, and I was crying the way that only a child can cry. I was in the back seat of the car. "I wanted to see the elephant." And my parents were like, "What is wrong with you?" "I wanted to see the elephant." And my mom said, "What elephant?" And I said, "Elephant Gerald." And my parents burst out laughing. And it was like my wife, when she grew up in Yazoo County, Mississippi, flat Mississippi. It's flat as far as you can see. And so when she was a child, her parents decided to take her and her sister to the Great Smoky Mountains so that they could see what not flat looks like. And they were going up the Great Smokies, and my mother-in-law, she wasn't my mother-in-law then, but it's just easier to describe her that way. My mother-in-law said, "Oh, my ears just popped." And my sister-in-law said, "Oh, my ears just popped." And my wife said, "My ears have not popped. What will happen if my ears don't pop?" And her father, bless his heart, he said, "Your head will explode." It's so beautiful. And so, Dad was going to kill Rudolph. Jimmy Carter was taking us down. I didn't get to make the Santa Claus. There was no elephant. And then we had to visit Aunt Lenore. Now, I don't know if you have an Aunt Lenore, but Aunt Lenore wasn't actually my aunt. She was my grandmother's friend. She didn't have any family of her own, and so she had adopted my grandmother's grandchildren as her own. And every year for Christmas, she would knit each one of myself and my cousins. She would knit us a pair of slippers. And I was 13 years old before I knew they were slippers, because they were not foot-shaped. They were football-shaped. And the hole was in the middle. So there was foot in front of the hole and foot behind the hole. And I don't know anybody that has foot in front of the hole and foot behind the hole, except the Charlie Brown characters, and I'm not related to them. So, and then Aunt Lenore was legally blind. And I think the ladies at the art store took advantage of that, or the yarn store, because she would go in and say, "You know, I like red and green." And they'd be like, "Here you go, Miss Lenore." And really it would be puke and vomit. And so, every year at Christmas, we had to go see Aunt Lenore, because let's face it, Christmas is the time of year you go see people you just don't like. And the subtext is right there. You knock on the door and you're like, "Merry Christmas." And it's like, if we liked you, we'd visit more often. And then you had to hug Aunt Lenore. Now here's the thing about Aunt Lenore. Aunt Lenore had that particular old lady smell, not the general. Most old ladies smell like lilacs. But Aunt Lenore had that particular old lady smell that is equal parts mothballs and cat urine. And you had to hug her. And hugging Aunt Lenore was like hugging an old Christmas tree. Because if you weren't gentle, you were going to break off a limb, you were probably going to get poked, and chances are you were going to come away sticky. And then it was like 3 days before Christmas. And I was in my house, I was all alone, I was wandering around. I'm the last of 5 children. It's not neglect, it was the 70s. So I was all alone in the house. Everyone else had gone somewhere. When you're 5 years old, the last of 5 children, no one gets tired of telling you you're everyone's responsibility, which means you are no one's responsibility. Everybody just assumes everybody else is teaching you things. I was 14 years old before I knew the difference between my shoulder and my elbow. And so sometimes I was just home alone. And I went in the living room, and there was the Christmas tree, and under it there were some presents, and some of those presents were for me. And I thought I might as well check. We might not even make it to Christmas. And I opened them up, and I saw what they were, and I rewrapped them. Now, my mother is a meticulous wrapper, and that is in no way a hip-hop reference. But I rewrapped them the best that I could. And then it was Christmas Eve, and I was in my bed. And I had these warring emotions going on. I was anxious and I was excited. I was anxious because we were almost there. There was just a couple hours till Christmas, but a lot could go wrong. Jimmy Carter could take us down. My dad could kill Rudolph. Who knows what could happen in those, but I was excited because we were only a few hours away. And if we could go a few more hours without Jimmy Carter taking us down or Dad killing Rudolph, we were gonna make it. So I lay there with those warring emotions going on in my head. And I don't know if I heard it or if I imagined it or if I dreamt it, but I heard the screen door go foom foom, and then I heard blam, and I thought he did it. He shot Rudolph. And I must have fallen asleep because I woke up later, and that's evidence that you fell asleep, right? Well, I'm driving. And so I woke up, and I don't know how it happened in your house or if you did it at all, but Santa did not leave the stockings hung by our chimney with care. Santa would bring the stockings into your bedroom, lay them down beside you in the bed. It wasn't so that you'd stay in bed 10 minutes longer on Christmas morning and not bother the adults. It's just the way Santa did stuff. And every year we got the same thing in our stockings. My grandfather, who we called Großpapa, and you're going to have to know this for tomorrow also. Großpapa is German. It means great papa. It has nothing to do with his personal hygiene habits. Großpapa, my parents, and Santa Claus worked in conjunction every year to fill our stockings. So every year we got the same thing. From my parents, we got an orange and 2 walnuts because they had lived through the Depression and they wanted us to know how miserable their Christmases had been. And then Großpapa, throughout the course of the year, he saved all of his prescription bottles and all of his change. And he filled the prescription bottles with change, and each of the 13 grandchildren got 1 bottle of change. But Großpapa did not care about equal pay. You got whatever coin fit the diameter of that bottle. So one kid was going to get $1.20 in dimes, and one kid was going to get $20 in Eisenhower dollars. And Großpapa didn't wash the prescription bottles either. So about halfway through Christmas, your mother would be like, "Take that dime out of your mouth," and you'd be like, "But it feels so." And then from Santa, myself and each of my siblings, we got 2 packets of flavored Quaker oatmeal. Ooh. We did not know that flavored Quaker oatmeal existed outside of Christmas. I don't know why, because now I know it's the same price. I think it just saved arguments, and so my mother was happy to just give us the plain stuff. She used to not buy sugar cereal also, and so she would just buy plain Rice Krispies, and then this is a trick in case your mother's still like this and you still live there. If you just take hot cocoa mix and sprinkle it on your Rice Krispies, you have Cocoa Pops. But anyway, from Santa we got 2 packets of flavored Quaker oatmeal, maple syrup, and then apples and cinnamon. That's one flavor. So we all got 2 packets, and then that would be our Christmas breakfast. Now I wet the bed until I was 11, not continuously. You know, I got some other stuff done. But that night I had wet the bed, and so my oatmeal had begun, and I thought this is awful because it's Christmas, right? This is supposed to be my Christmas breakfast, and so when nobody's looking, I'm going to have to switch that with one of my siblings' oatmeals. And then I went upstairs and I opened my presents, and some of them weren't what they were supposed to be, and I know what they were supposed to be because I'd opened them 3 days ago. And I opened one, and it was supposed to be a football, but now it's just a pillow folded up and taped up with duct tape. And then I might have given myself away when I opened another one, and I said, "This is not supposed to be a 16-ounce can of mixed vegetables." And then I had to learn a very valuable lesson. Let's just be clear, Christmas Day is no day to learn a valuable lesson. And that night, as I lay in bed, I was thinking. And I know what I wasn't thinking, because I was 5. But I was not thinking almost all these things happened because there was some misunderstanding, right? I didn't think that. And I didn't think, you know what? Your worst Christmas is probably better than most people's best Christmas. And you should be thankful that you have educators who want to expand your mind, and family members like your grandmother who is willing to look to the people, the marginalized people in society, like Aunt Lenore, and bring them in so that they feel like they have a place and that they're loved and that they have someone that they can share their life with, and that you have a family that feeds you and loves you when they remember you. And there's a roof over your head and a nice, safe, warm bed every night to pee in. But I didn't think that, because I was 5. And what I wish I'd been thinking, but there's no way I could have articulated this, what I wish I'd been thinking is almost all of these problems happened because I misunderstood something. I misunderstood Elephant Joe, and I misunderstood Jimmy Carter taking us to hell. Almost all these problems are because I didn't hear the right thing. And I bet I'm going to go with 92% of the problems in the world happen because we misunderstand other people. And a lot of times, doesn't matter which side of the issue you're on, none of you are absolved from this. A lot of times we deliberately misunderstand people. We see somebody coming toward us and we think, I don't care what that person says, I don't like their skin color, I don't like who they love, I don't like how they identify, I don't like who they worship, I don't like who they voted for, I don't care what that person says to me, I am not going to listen to them. But I think if we took like 5 minutes out of our day, not to agree with necessarily, but at least to listen to what other people have to say, we might be able to solve, I'm going to go with 81% of the problems in the world. But I didn't think that because I was 5. What I thought was, this was the worst Christmas ever. The end. Thank you very much. That was the entertainment portion of our program. Anyway, I just want to do a brief commercial. Again, over here on the table, there's all kinds of media from the artists that have performed for you this evening, except Will, because, you know, Will doesn't have
I tried.
But that's okay. You can just buy more of mine and Greg's. There are books and there are compact discs, in case you still know what that is and have a device for that. But there are also USB sticky things, so you can just stick them right in your car where your phone charges, and it will play through your radio. So there's no excuse telling me, oh, I don't have a CD player in my car. So there's all that stuff, and then we're going to be right back here tomorrow. If you're not aware of that, same time, I believe. I'm not the person that knows this information, but I'll say it anyway. 7 o'clock here tomorrow. Brand new stories, brand new material from the 3 of us. I don't know what else is happening, but thank you so much for coming out, and I hope to see you tomorrow and somewhere else.
What a great evening. Thanks to everyone for being part of it. I was going to do a little serious speech. He did it better. About caring about other people. And what we did tonight, we were all in the same place, seeing the beauty of the world, laughing, sometimes a few tears, and it's just a wonderful evening. Please come back tomorrow. There's also cargo posters over there. Just take some of those, pass them around. The idea that everyone has a unique gift to give the world, and we have to find what our own is and to help others find theirs, and that makes the world be a little better place. Thank you for coming.